Are you seriously stealing my parking spot right in front of me?
I'm not trying to argue, ma'am. I got to this parking space first.
Do you have any idea who you're talking to? I could buy your car with what's in my purse.
Vicky Gallmeyer kept shouting at Ralph Dillon, determined to force him out of the parking space. Just then, near the hotel entrance, her husband, Roland Gallmeyer, noticed the commotion and hurried toward them.
Vicky, stop right now. That's not just some stranger. He is our $300 million investor.
It was only then that she realized the parking spot was the least of her problems. She had just picked a fight with the one man her husband's company couldn't afford to lose. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The Atlanta sun was already mean at 9 in the morning. It pressed down on the Meridian Grand Hotel parking lot like a hand on the back of your neck. The kind of heat that made you want to move fast and get inside. Ralph Dillon wasn't moving fast. He never did. He pulled his silver rental sedan into an open space near the hotel's main entrance and cut the engine. For a moment he just sat there, the air conditioning ticking as it died, a yellow legal pad balanced on his knee. He'd been reviewing numbers since 6 a.m., old habit. His mother used to say he came out of the womb already checking his work. He was 42 years old. He'd built a $2.4 billion firm from nothing. He still used a yellow legal pad. Ralph clicked his pen, made one last note in the margin, and tucked the pad into his leather folio. He checked his watch, a simple Seiko, nothing flashy, and nodded to himself. 8 minutes early. Right on time. He stepped out of the car into the August heat. He didn't hear the Mercedes coming until it was almost on top of him. The white SUV came in hard and fast from the main lane, tires chirping as it braked to a sharp stop directly behind his bumper. The engine stayed running. Ralph turned, one hand still on his car door. The driver's window dropped. The woman behind the wheel with blonde hair pulled back tight. Oversized sunglasses pushed up on her nose. She was dressed like the hotel lobby. Cream blazer, gold jewelry, a designer bag riding shotgun. Everything about her said, "I don't wait." She looked at Ralph the way you look at something in your way. "Excuse me." Her voice was sharp, clipped. "I was waiting for that spot." Ralph kept his voice even. "Ma'am, I came in from the entrance lane. I don't think you were in the queue." "I don't care what you think." She pulled her sunglasses down just enough to look at him over the rims. "I was here first. I want you to move your car." He looked at her for a moment. Around them, the parking lot hummed with morning arrivals. A few people were already slowing down, sensing something. "I'm not going to do that," Ralph said simply. The woman's jaw tightened. She threw open her door and climbed out. Her name was Vicky Gallmeyer, and now that she was standing, she was louder. "This is unbelievable." She planted herself between her SUV and Ralph's car, arms moving, voice rising. "You just pull in and act like you own the place? Do you even know whose hotel this is?" Ralph said nothing. He stood with his folio under his arm and his feet shoulder-width apart. Still, patient. The kind of still that comes from knowing exactly who you are. Vicky turned toward a young parking attendant who'd appeared near the entrance, clearly hoping he'd never have to deal with something like this today. "You," she pointed at him. "This man took my spot. I need you to handle this right now. Get security out here." The attendant looked at Ralph, looked at Vicky, looked at his shoes. He didn't move. By now, a small crowd had gathered, hotel guests pausing on the walkway. A woman with a rolling suitcase stopping near the entrance doors. A heavy-set man in a conference lanyard pretending to check his phone. And 20 feet away, almost invisible near a row of parked cars, a woman in her late 60s with silver-streaked hair and quiet, watchful eyes. She'd been walking toward the hotel entrance when the Mercedes pulled in. She'd stopped the moment she heard the tone in Vicky's voice. Her name was Dolores Evanson. She was a retired schoolteacher from Columbus, Ohio. She'd spent 33 years in a classroom learning to recognize exactly this kind of moment. She raised her phone and pressed record. Vicky stepped closer to Ralph. Too close. She dropped her voice. But not enough. People like you, she said, always think the rules don't apply. The words landed like something thrown. The man with the conference lanyard looked away. The woman with the suitcase went still. Even the parking attendant seemed to stop breathing. Ralph looked at Vicky Gallmeyer for a long, quiet moment. Then he tucked his folio more firmly under his arm, turned, and walked toward the hotel entrance without a single word. Behind him, Vicky's voice followed him across the asphalt. That's right. Walk away. She wasn't done. She turned to the small crowd that had gathered, spreading her hands wide like she was the wronged party in a courtroom. Did everybody see that? He just takes my spot and walks away like I'm nobody, like I'm nothing. A hotel bellman near the entrance doors shifted uncomfortably. Two women in business attire exchanged a glance. Nobody said a word. Vicky pointed at the attendant again. I want his license plate number. I want it now. The attendant pulled out a small notepad with shaking hands. That was when the hotel's front doors burst open. Roland Gallmeyer came through them at nearly a full run. He was dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His conference lanyard swung against his chest as he moved. His face was tight, not angry, scared. He'd been standing at a second-floor conference room window when he saw the white Mercedes pull in. He'd watched his wife climb out. He'd watched the argument build. And then his assistant had appeared at his elbow with a single whispered sentence that turned his blood cold. Sir, that's Ralph Dillon. Roland had been moving before she finished the name. He crossed the parking lot in long, urgent strides, eyes locked on Vicky's back, his hand already raised like he could physically stop whatever was about to come out of her mouth next. Vicky! His voice came out strained and urgent. Vicky? Stop. She spun around, startled. Roland, that man just... That's Ralph Dillon. Roland said it out loud, clearly. His voice carried across the parking lot without him meaning it to. Vicky, that is Ralph Dillon. He is our $300 million investor. The silence that followed was total. Every head in that small crowd turned, first toward Roland, then toward the hotel entrance where Ralph had just disappeared through the glass doors. Vicky's mouth was open. Nothing came out of it. The color drained from her face so fast it was almost painful to watch. Her hand, the one she'd been pointing with, dropped to her side. The oversized sunglasses slid down her nose, and she didn't push them back up. Roland stepped close to her, jaw tight, voice finally dropping now that the damage was already done. He's the keynote guest. He's been scheduled for 6 months. His name is on every single briefing document I sent you. Vicky turned slowly toward the entrance doors. Ralph was gone. Roland looked at the crowd still standing there. The bellman, the women in business attire, the attendant with his notepad, Dolores Evanson with her phone, and every single one of them had heard exactly what he said. He managed a thin, hollow smile. I apologize for the disruption, he said to no one in particular. Everything is fine. Nobody moved. Nobody looked like they believed him. He turned, one hand firm at the small of Vicky's back, and steered her toward the entrance. She went without a word, the fight gone out of her completely, replaced by something that looked a lot like dread. Dolores Evanson watched them go. Then she lowered her phone, pressed stop, and stood very still in the August heat. She thought about what she had just recorded. All of it. The lobby of the Meridian Grand was cool and quiet. Ralph walked through the glass doors and felt the air conditioning hit him like a wall. He slowed his pace, straightened his shoulders, let the sounds of the parking lot fall away behind him. The crowd, Vicky's voice, all of it. He was good at that. Compartmentalizing, tucking things away into small, sealed rooms inside himself and walking forward. He'd been doing it his whole life, but his jaw was still tight. He was 3 steps into the lobby when he heard the doors open behind him. Not Roland this time, not Vicky. Just the sound of the outside world rushing back in for a second before the doors sealed it out again. He didn't turn around. He kept walking. Behind him, out in the parking lot, Vicky Gallmeyer had not followed her husband's lead. She stood exactly where Roland had left her, frozen for about 4 seconds. And then something shifted behind her eyes. Maybe it was embarrassment curdling into anger. Maybe it was the crowd still standing there, watching her, and the unbearable feeling of being looked at like she'd done something wrong. Whatever it was, it reignited her. She turned back toward the entrance doors, raised her voice, and let it carry. "I don't care who he is." She said it loud enough that the bellman near the doors took a step back. "He doesn't get to just take whatever he wants and walk away. That is not how this works." The young parking attendant still had his notepad out. He looked at Roland. Roland had stopped walking, his eyes closed for one brief, pained second. Vicky wasn't finished. "Nobody just gets to disrespect me like that." She pulled her sunglasses completely off now, her voice climbing. "I don't care if he has $300 million or $300 billion. You do not talk to me that way. You do not just dismiss me." A woman near the entrance with a rolling suitcase turned to look. A man in a delivery uniform slowed on the walkway. The crowd that had started to drift away stopped drifting. Dolores Evanson hadn't moved an inch. Her phone was still up. Inside the lobby, one of the hotel's front desk staff, a young woman in a navy blazer, had stepped around the counter toward the entrance doors. She could hear the commotion through the glass. She looked at her colleague. Her colleague was already reaching for the phone. Ralph was halfway to the registration desk when he heard it. Not the words. The glass doors muffled most of those. But the tone. That particular pitch a voice reaches when someone has decided they no longer care who hears them. He'd heard that tone before. He knew exactly what it meant. He stopped walking. He stood in the middle of the lobby with his folio under his arm and his back to the entrance doors. Around him, other summit guests moved through the space, checking in, comparing lanyards, rolling luggage toward elevators. A normal Tuesday morning. He counted to 5. Then he turned around and walked back toward the doors. He pushed through them and stepped back out into the heat. Vicky was mid-sentence when she saw him. She stopped. The crowd saw him too. The attendant's notepad dropped to his side. Roland, standing 10 feet away, went absolutely rigid. Ralph walked back to his car. Slowly, deliberately. He stopped beside it and looked at Vicky across the hood. "I want to make sure I understand you correctly," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "You're still out here." Vicky lifted her chin. "I have every right to be out here." "You do," Ralph said. He nodded slowly. "And I have every right to park in a space I legally entered. We've established both of those things. You were rude to me. I told you I wasn't going to move my car." He tilted his head slightly. "That's not rudeness. That's just the truth." Her eyes narrowed. "People like you always have an answer for everything, don't you?" There it was again. People like you. Ralph held her gaze and didn't blink. Around them, the parking lot was so quiet, you could hear the heat. "Say that one more time," he said softly. "I want to make sure everyone here hears it clearly." Vicky's mouth opened, then closed. Roland stepped forward. "That's enough." His voice was tight and controlled, but his eyes were desperate. "Vicky, now." She looked at Ralph one final time, something flickering behind her eyes that wasn't quite anger anymore. Then she turned and walked toward the entrance, heels sharp against the asphalt. Roland looked at Ralph. Ralph looked back at him. Neither man said a word. Then Roland turned and followed his wife inside. Dolores Evenson lowered her phone for the second time that morning. She pressed stop, looked down at the screen, and checked that the video had saved. It had. Both of them. The registration desk was a long stretch of white marble near the far end of the lobby. Behind it stood two staff members in navy blazers, both of them moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd been managing a busy conference hotel since before the sun came up. Ralph approached the desk and set his folio down. "Good morning." The woman behind the counter smiled at him. A real smile, not a hotel smile. "Name?" "Ralph Dillon," she typed. Looked at her screen. Typed again. Then she reached under the counter and produced a badge in a lanyard, already printed, already laminated. "Ralph Dillon, keynote guest, Dillon Capital Partners." "Here you are, Mr. Dillon." She held it out with both hands. "We're very glad to have you with us. If there's anything you need during the summit, please don't hesitate." "Thank you." Ralph clipped the badge to his shirt pocket, picked up his folio, and stepped away from the desk. He moved toward the elevator bank on the far side of the lobby, rolling his shoulders once as he walked, the only outward sign that anything was sitting on them. The lobby was filling up around him. Summit guests in business attire, rolling luggage, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from a hospitality cart near the windows. Normal Tuesday morning sounds. He pressed the elevator button and waited. His reflection stared back at him from the polished metal doors. Navy shirt, leather folio, simple watch. A man who looked exactly like what he was. Somebody who came to work. He thought about the parking lot, about the specific way Vicky Gallmeyer had looked at him when she climbed out of her Mercedes. Not angry at first, not even entitled. Just blank. The way people look at something they haven't decided has value yet. He knew that look. He'd been collecting it his whole life. The elevator arrived. He stepped in. On the second floor, at the far end of a wide carpeted corridor lined with conference room doors, Roland Gallmeyer stood at a window. He was not in a meeting. He was not reviewing his notes for the morning session. He was standing completely still with both hands in his trouser pockets, staring down at the parking lot below, watching his wife's white Mercedes sit empty in the space next to Ralph's rental sedan. His assistant, a sharp young woman named Pammy, stood 3 feet behind him holding a tablet. "He checked in?" Roland asked, without turning around. "2 minutes ago. Registration confirmed." Roland exhaled through his nose. "Which room?" 1412. "But Mr. Gallmeyer, he's heading up now. Elevator Bank A." Roland turned from the window. In several years of business, he had navigated bad mergers, failed acquisitions, a lawsuit that nearly took the company down in 2019, and a board revolt that lasted 8 months. He had a face for crisis, smooth, controlled, certain. That face was not present right now. What was present instead was something raw. The expression of a man who had just watched his wife light a match in a room full of expensive things. "Get me the briefing sheet on Dillon," he said. Pammy was already pulling it up. "You have it memorized, sir. You've reviewed it 11 times in the past 2 weeks. Then pull it up so I have something to look at." She pulled it up. Roland took the tablet. Ralph Dillon, 42, founder and CEO of Dillon Capital Partners. Assets under management, $2.4 billion. Pending investment in Gallmeyer Meridian Brands, $300 million. Keynote guest, Southeast Business Summit. Described in a Forbes profile from 2 years ago as, Roland had underlined this himself, the most quietly powerful man in American private equity. Quietly powerful. Roland set the tablet down on the windowsill. He looked at the parking lot one more time. The silver rental. The white Mercedes. The small scuff mark on the asphalt where Vicky's heel had turned when she finally walked away. $300 million. He picked up his phone, called down to the front desk, and asked them to prepare the private pre-session suite on the 14th floor with fresh coffee and breakfast for 2. Then he straightened his tie, picked up his conference lanyard from the chair where he'd left it, and looked at Pammy. Which elevator did he take? A, sir. He'd be on 14 by now. Roland nodded once and moved toward the corridor. He had a great deal of ground to cover, and not very much time to cover it. The 14th floor was quiet. Ralph stepped off the elevator into a wide corridor with dark carpeting and warm lighting. Framed prints on the walls. The distant sound of housekeeping somewhere down the hall. He checked the room numbers and turned left toward 14-12. He was halfway there when he heard the stairwell door at the end of the corridor bang open. Roland Gallmeyer came through it breathing harder than a man in a charcoal suit should be. He'd taken the stairs, all 14 floors, rather than wait for a second elevator. His face was flushed. His lanyard was twisted. He straightened it as he walked, and by the time he closed the distance between them, he had rearranged his expression into something that resembled warmth. He was good at it. Ralph could tell he'd had decades of practice. Mr. Dillon. Roland extended his hand while he was still 4 steps away. Ralph. What a genuine pleasure. Roland Gallmeyer. Ralph shook it. Mr. Gallmeyer. Please. Roland. We've been exchanging documents for 6 months. I think we're past formalities. He laughed. It was a polished laugh, the kind that came out automatically at the right moments. I saw you were checking in, and I wanted to catch you personally before the morning session, give you a proper welcome. I appreciate that. Can I walk you to your room? I actually had the team set up the private suite down on this floor. Fresh coffee, breakfast. I thought we might have a few minutes before things kick off downstairs. Ralph looked at him for a moment. Sure, he said. They walked side by side down the corridor. Roland talked. He was very good at talking, filling space with the right words, the right tone, the right amount of enthusiasm without crossing into desperation. He talked about the summit's attendance numbers, about a panel that afternoon he thought Ralph would enjoy, about how much the Gallmeyer Meridian team had been looking forward to this week. Ralph listened and said very little. Roland swiped a key card and opened the door to the suite. A corner room with floor-to-ceiling windows, a round table set with coffee and covered breakfast plates, and a view of downtown Atlanta stretching out beneath a bright blue sky. It was a good room, deliberately chosen. Ralph set his folio on the table and poured himself a coffee. Roland closed the door. The shift was immediate. Not dramatic. Roland was too practiced for drama. But the conference host energy dialed down, and something more careful took its place. He moved to the table and poured his own coffee, his back half turned. "Ralph," he said, "I want to address this morning." Ralph wrapped both hands around his cup. "All right?" Roland turned to face him. His expression was arranged into something that was trying very hard to be sincere. "What happened in the parking lot? What my wife said to you, I am deeply, genuinely sorry. That was unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. And I want you to know that it does not reflect who we are as a family or who we are as a company." Ralph said nothing. He took a sip of his coffee. Roland pressed forward. "Vicky, she's passionate. She's spirited. She can be— Look, she didn't know who you were. If she had known—" Ralph set his cup down. The sound it made against the saucer was very small, but Roland stopped talking. "Say that again," Ralph said. Roland blinked. I just meant, if she had known." Ralph repeated the words slowly, not as a question, just putting them back in the room where Roland could see them clearly. "That's what you said. I meant that if she had known you were our guest. If she had known I had $300 million, Ralph said, she would have behaved differently. Roland opened his mouth, closed it. That's the apology you're giving me. Ralph picked up his folio from the table. He wasn't loud. He wasn't angry in any way that raised his voice. But something in the room had changed. A drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. You're telling me that what she did was only wrong because of my bank account. Ralph, I didn't mean it that way. I think you meant it exactly that way. He buttoned the top button of his jacket. I'll sit through the morning session as a courtesy to the other guests. But I want to be very clear with you. Nothing is signed. Nothing is closed. And what I've seen today, both in that parking lot and in this room, is something I need to think very carefully about. Roland's face had gone the color of old paper. Ralph walked to the door and opened it. He paused in the frame. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Mr. Gallmeyer. His voice was quiet, final. I know exactly what people like you means. He walked out. The door swung shut behind him with a soft, definitive click. Roland stood alone in the suite, with 2 full cups of coffee, and a breakfast neither of them had touched. He looked at the closed door for a long moment. Then he looked out at the Atlanta skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows, all that bright blue sky, and felt the morning beginning to come apart in his hands. The morning session ran from 10 until noon. Ralph sat in the 3rd row of the summit's main ballroom, not the front, never the front, and listened to 3 consecutive presentations about consumer market trends, supply chain resilience, and the future of mid-size American retail brands. He took notes on his yellow legal pad. He asked 2 questions during the Q&A. Both were good questions, the kind that made the presenter pause before answering. Nobody in that ballroom would have guessed that 2 hours earlier he'd been standing in a parking lot while a woman pointed her finger at his chest. That was the thing about Ralph Dillon. He did not wear his wounds where people could see them. Across the ballroom, Roland sat in the back row. He didn't take any notes. He spent most of the session watching Ralph's shoulders and trying to read stillness like it was a language he could decode. At noon, the session broke for lunch. The ballroom filled with the sound of chairs and conversation, and the smell of a buffet being uncovered somewhere nearby. Ralph closed his legal pad, capped his pen, and moved toward the exit. Roland was already gone. Ralph rode the elevator to the 14th floor. He slid his keycard and pushed open the door to room 1412. It was a standard room, not a suite, not anything that announced him. A neatly made bed, a small desk by the window, his overnight bag still zipped on the luggage rack. Josephine Overholt was sitting at the desk with a laptop open and 2 phones face up on the surface beside it. She had arrived while Ralph was in the session. She had a key, because she always had a key. In 19 years of working together, she had never once waited in a lobby. She looked up when he came in, looked at his face, looked back at her laptop. "Close the door," she said. He closed it. He set his folio on the bed and sat down across from her in the small armchair by the window. Outside, Atlanta glittered under the noon sun. He loosened the collar of his navy shirt and leaned back and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he told her everything. He told it the way he told her most things, in order, without drama, leaving nothing out. The parking lot, the Mercedes, Vicky's voice carrying across the asphalt, the words, Roland bursting through the doors, Roland announcing his name and his investment figure to an audience of bystanders, the suite on the 14th floor, the coffee, the apology that was not an apology. Josephine listened the way she always listened, completely still, both hands flat on the desk, eyes on his face. She did not react to the parking lot part. She did not react to the words part. She had been a black woman in professional spaces for 40 years, and she had her own collection of moments like this, stored in her own sealed rooms. When Ralph finished, she was quiet for a few seconds. "What do you want to do?" she said. "I don't know yet." She nodded slowly. She turned back to her laptop, typed something, turned it to face him. On the screen was a document, the Amy Dylan Foundation's funding projection. A spreadsheet with 2 columns. Current endowment. Projected endowment after the Gallmeyer Meridian investment closed. The difference between the 2 numbers was $300 million. Ralph looked at the screen. He didn't touch it. Amy Dylan had taught 4th grade at Westfield Elementary School in Birmingham, Alabama, for 17 years. She had bought classroom supplies with her own money. She had stayed late 3 nights a week to tutor kids whose parents worked double shifts. She had believed, genuinely, fiercely, without any cynicism, that every child deserved a real chance at learning. She had died of pancreatic cancer on a Thursday morning 3 years ago. Ralph had been holding her hand. The foundation was everything she believed in, structured into something that would outlast both of them. It needed this money. He had promised her, in the quiet of a hospital room, that he would build it right. He looked at the spreadsheet for a long time. Then he looked at Josephine. "Amy always said you could forgive someone," he said quietly, "and still not give them your trust." Josephine held his gaze. She was usually right. "Yeah." Ralph leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. She was. He picked up his phone from the armchair's side table and scrolled to a name. Terence Verloc, his legal counsel for 11 years. The only person besides Josephine he trusted completely with anything that mattered. He pressed call. Terence picked up on the second ring. "I need you to pull everything on Gallmeyer Meridian," Ralph said. "Financials, employment records, litigation history, HR complaints, all of it." A pause on the other end. "How deep?" "All the way down," Ralph said. "Give me 48 hours. He hung up, set the phone back down, looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline burning bright under the noon sun. He still didn't know what he was going to do, but he was going to know exactly what he was dealing with before he decided. The afternoon session started at 2. Ralph was back in his seat in the 3rd row by 1:55. Legal pad. Capped pen. The same stillness he'd carried all morning. Nobody sitting near him would have known that 45 minutes earlier he'd set something in motion that couldn't be undone. That was fine. They didn't need to know. The afternoon ran 3 hours, 2 panels, and a networking break in the middle, where people stood around with sparkling water and business cards and talked about Q3 projections. Ralph moved through it all with the ease of a man who had attended 1,000 events like this one. He shook hands. He answered questions about Dylan Capital with the practiced brevity of someone who no longer needed to explain himself. He smiled when smiling was appropriate. Roland watched him from across the room during the networking break. Ralph could feel it without looking. The specific quality of attention that comes from someone who is very worried about you. He did not acknowledge it. At 5 o'clock, the afternoon session ended, and the ballroom began emptying toward the hotel bar and the restaurant and the elevators. Ralph rode up to the 14th floor, changed out of his navy shirt into a fresh one, and went back downstairs for the summit's evening reception. The reception was held in the hotel's rooftop garden. Strings of lights, high-top tables, the Atlanta skyline going amber and pink in the evening light. It was beautiful in the way that expensive things arranged by professional people are always beautiful. Ralph accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and found a position near the railing where he could see the city spread out below him. He had been there perhaps 15 minutes when he heard heels on the slate behind him. He turned. Vicky Gallmeyer looked nothing like the woman from the parking lot. She had changed into a simpler dress. Navy, understated. The gold jewelry was gone, replaced by something smaller, quieter. Her hair was down now instead of pulled back. She was holding a glass of white wine in both hands, like it was giving her something to hold on to, and her expression was arranged into something careful and soft. She stopped a respectful distance away. "Mr. Dillon." Her voice was different, too. Lower, measured. "I wondered if I might have a moment." Ralph looked at her. "Of course." She moved to the railing beside him and looked out at the skyline for a second, like she was gathering something. Then she turned to face him. "I want to apologize," she said, "for this morning. The way I spoke to you was completely out of line, and I'm truly sorry. It was an awful way to behave, and you didn't deserve any of it. It was a good apology. The words were right. The delivery was controlled, but not robotic." She held eye contact without overdoing it. Ralph nodded slowly. "I appreciate you saying that." She touched his arm once. Brief, light. "I hope it doesn't color your experience of the summit, or of Roland's company." A small, careful smile. "He thinks the world of you. That's kind of him." She held the smile for another moment, then excused herself gracefully and moved back toward the other guests. Roland, standing 20 feet away near the bar, watched the exchange with the focused attention of a man monitoring a vital sign. Ralph turned back to the skyline. He stood there with his sparkling water and the evening light on his face, and he thought about the word she had used. Unpleasantness. That was what she'd called it. This morning's unpleasantness. Like it was a scheduling conflict. Like it was a coffee order that came out wrong. Not an act. Not a choice. An unpleasantness. He thought about the parking lot attendant with his shaking notepad. He thought about the crowd that went silent. He thought about Dolores Evanson standing 20 feet away with her phone raised and her school teacher's eyes seeing everything. He thought about Roland in the suite. "She didn't know who you were." He finished his sparkling water, set the glass on a passing tray, said goodbye to 2 people he'd promised to follow up with, rode the elevator back to the 14th floor. Room 1412 was quiet. Josephine had gone to her own room for the night. His yellow legal pad sat on the desk where he'd left it, open to the last page of notes he'd taken in the afternoon session. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his phone. He opened his texts, found Terrence's name, typed 4 words. "Whatever you find, call me." He set the phone on the nightstand, lay back on top of the covers, fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling in the dark for a long time before sleep came. Ralph slept 6 hours. He was up at 5:30, legal pad on his knee, coffee from the in-room machine going cold beside him while he worked. By the time the Atlanta sun had cleared the skyline, he had reviewed his notes from both sessions, drafted 3 follow-up emails to contacts he'd made at the reception, and eaten half a granola bar from his overnight bag. Josephine arrived at 7 with a proper coffee from the lobby restaurant and a look on her face that meant she'd already been working for 2 hours. "Terrence called," she said, setting the cup on the desk beside him. "He said 48 hours still stands, but he's already found some things worth noting." "He'll call when he's ready," Ralph said. He picked up the coffee. "What's on the schedule?" "Breakfast panel at 8. Your keynote slot is 11 to 11:45. Afternoon breakout at 2. She paused. "Roland's assistant called this morning. Wanted to confirm you were still planning to attend." Ralph looked up from his notepad. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you were planning to attend the summit as scheduled." Josephine pulled out her own phone. "I didn't tell her anything else." "Good." He was downstairs and in his seat for the breakfast panel by 7:55. 1 floor below the main ballroom, in a windowless meeting room off the hotel's business corridor, Roland Gallmeyer had been sitting across from Brent Charlton since 7 a.m. Brent Charlton was 38 years old and had the particular energy of someone who had spent his entire career being useful to more powerful people. He was lean and quick, and he thought fast. Not always in the right direction, but fast. His title was VP of Investor Relations. His actual function on mornings like this one was damage control. Roland had told him everything. The parking lot, the suite, Ralph's face when Roland said the words, "She didn't know who you were," the door closing. Brent had listened without interrupting. When Roland finished, Brent put his pen down on the legal pad in front of him and said, "Okay, here's where we are." He laid it out cleanly. First priority, identify every witness from the parking lot and determine whether anyone had recorded the incident. Second, manage Vicky's public presence for the remainder of the summit, which meant keeping her visible but quiet, warm but not performative. Third, make Ralph Dillon feel so valued, so genuinely celebrated during his keynote and throughout the day, that the parking lot became something he would rather leave behind than carry forward. "The deal isn't dead," Brent said. "Not yet. Men like Dillon don't make $300 million decisions based on emotion. He's a numbers man. We give him perfect numbers and a perfect experience for the next 48 hours. And we remind him what this investment means for both sides." Roland nodded slowly. "And the witnesses?" "I'll handle it." Brent spent the next hour moving through the hotel with the unhurried efficiency of someone running a quiet errand. He had a list, compiled from parking lot security camera footage that the hotel's head of operations had been persuaded to review with him, of 7 people who had been present during the confrontation. He worked through the list methodically, approaching each person in casual, incidental ways. A word in the breakfast line, a comment during the morning coffee break. Gentle, friendly fishing. Was the summit going well? Had they seen anything interesting yesterday morning? Lovely hotel, wasn't it? Most people gave him nothing of interest. Then he found Dolores Evanson. She was sitting alone at a small table outside the education track panel room on the second floor, a cup of tea in front of her and a program booklet open in her lap. She was 67 years old with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck, and the particular quality of stillness that belongs to people who have spent decades in rooms full of children learning to notice everything. Brent sat down across from her with his best smile, introduced himself as part of the summit's hospitality team, asked how she was finding the event, made a casual reference to the commotion in the parking lot yesterday, awful business, so sorry if it caused any disruption, and watched her face for the thing he was looking for. Dolores looked at him over the rims of her reading glasses. She said the parking lot had been fine and that she'd had a lovely morning and that the education panel was very informative. She did not mention her phone. She did not mention the video. She did not change her expression once. Brent thanked her and excused himself. He walked back toward the elevator bank and mentally crossed her off the list as a low-priority witness. He had read her completely wrong. Dolores watched him go. She waited until he had stepped into the elevator and the doors had closed. Then she reached into her handbag, took out her phone, and called her nephew. He answered on the second ring. "Someone just came asking questions," she said quietly. "A man from the hotel, very smooth, very interested in whether anyone had recorded anything." Her nephew was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay?" "I'm perfectly fine," Dolores said. "I've been dealing with dishonest people since 1987. I just wanted you to know that someone is trying to find out what I have. So we should move sooner rather than later?" Dolores picked up her tea. "Not yet," she said, "but soon. And when we do, I want it to mean something. I want the timing to be right." She took a sip, set the cup down carefully. "Trust me," she said. "I know how to wait." The ballroom was full by 10:55. Not the polite half-full of a morning panel where people drifted in with coffee cups and found seats near the exits. full. Every chair taken, people standing along the back wall, a quiet energy in the room that came from an audience that had actually chosen to be there. Ralph stood just off stage in a narrow corridor behind the ballroom's side entrance, alone with his yellow legal pad, and the last 5 minutes before he had to put it away. He read through his notes one final time, capped his pen, folded the pad into his folio, and handed the folio to Josephine, who had appeared beside him without sound, the way she always did. "How are you?" she asked. "Ready?" he said. She nodded once and stepped back. The summit's host, a tall man with an enthusiastic voice who had been running this event for 11 years, stepped to the podium and began the introduction. He talked about Dillon Capital Partners. He talked about Ralph's career, Birmingham to Chicago, one firm to another. Then the leap at 31 years old into building something of his own with borrowed office space and a second-hand desk. He talked about $2.4 billion in assets under management. He talked about Forbes and Fortune and a dozen other publications that had tried to profile a man who consistently declined to be profiled. The applause started before he finished the introduction. Ralph walked out. He didn't wave, didn't perform. He walked to the podium and set both hands on its edges and looked out at the room for a moment before he said a word. Just looked, the way a man looks at something he's genuinely glad to see. Then he started talking. He talked for 45 minutes without notes. He talked about his father, who had worked a factory floor in Birmingham for 31 years and came home every night smelling of machine oil and still found the energy to sit with Ralph at the kitchen table and help him with his math homework. He talked about the first time he understood what compound interest meant, really understood it in his body, not just on paper, and how it felt like someone had handed him a key to a room he hadn't known existed. He talked about the deals that had worked and the ones that hadn't, and what the difference between them had taught him. He talked about failure without making it romantic. He did not talk about the parking lot. He did not talk about Vicky. He did not even glance in Roland's direction. But when he talked about what he was building next, the investments he was evaluating, the kind of companies he was looking for, the values he required from any organization that wanted his capital, the room was absolutely silent. The kind of silence that means everyone is listening with everything they have. The applause when he finished was long and genuine and came from people standing up. Roland, in the back row, stood with everyone else and clapped with an expression on his face that was equal parts pride and desperation. The evening reception that followed the afternoon sessions was smaller than the night before. A private dinner in one of the hotel's banquet rooms for summit speakers and major guests. Round tables, candles, good food. Roland had arranged Ralph's seat to his own right. Over dinner, Roland was at his absolute best. Attentive, funny when the moment called for it, substantive when Ralph wanted substance. He talked about Gallmeyer Meridian's expansion plans with genuine knowledge and real passion. Whatever else Roland Gallmeyer was, he understood his business. He introduced Ralph to 3 people at the table worth knowing. He filled Ralph's water glass himself when the server was slow. Brent Charlton, seated 2 tables away, watched the dinner with the focus of a man monitoring an operation in progress. After the main course, over coffee, Roland leaned toward Ralph with a more private expression. "I hope today felt like what it was meant to feel like," he said. "A genuine welcome." Ralph looked at him. "It was a good day. I meant what I said yesterday about being sorry. I want you to know that. I know you do." Roland nodded, satisfied. He had read Ralph's courtesy as progress. He had read the day's warmth as a closing gap. He believed, by the time the dinner ended and they shook hands in the corridor outside the banquet room, that things were moving back in the right direction. Ralph rode the elevator to the 14th floor, changed out of his dinner clothes, sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet room. He thought about the word Roland had used. Genuine. He thought about what genuine actually looked like, and how rarely it looked like what had just happened at that dinner table. He picked up his phone and typed a text to Terrence. "Whatever you find, call me first. Don't wait until you have everything." He set the phone on the nightstand. He did not sleep as easily as the night before. The call came at 6:43 in the morning. Ralph was already awake. He'd been up since 5, sitting in the armchair by the window with his legal pad, and the city still dark below him. He'd written 3 pages of nothing important. Numbers, fragments, the kind of thinking that comes out through a pen when your mind is working on something it hasn't fully formed yet. His phone buzzed on the windowsill. Terrence. He picked up before the second buzz. "Tell me," Ralph said. "I need to come in person," Terrence said. "Are you in the room?" "I'll be here." Terrence arrived 40 minutes later with a manila folder thick enough to need a rubber band around it. He was 49 years old, compact and precise, with the kind of face that gave nothing away in a courtroom or anywhere else. He sat across from Ralph at the small dining table, removed the rubber band, and opened the folder without any preamble. 3 EEOC complaints, he said, filed against Gallmeyer Meridian in the past 6 years. All 3 from black employees. All 3 settled. All 3 buried under non-disclosure agreements. He slid the first set of documents across the table. The settlements ranged from $80,000 to $240,000. None of them went to litigation. They were handled fast and quietly. Ralph looked at the documents. He didn't touch them yet. "Keep going," he said. Before Nadia Filbert took the CFO role, her predecessor was a man named Gregory Allen. Black, 44 at the time, 12 years with the company. He was VP of Marketing, not CFO. But from what I can piece together from court filings, he was being informally tracked for the CFO position. Terrence turned a page. He was terminated in 2021. The company cited performance issues. He sued for wrongful termination and racial discrimination. The suit was settled 18 months later for $1.2 million. He paused. With a full NDA. Ralph was quiet for a moment. "And Filbert got the CFO job after Allen was gone?" 6 months after the settlement. The board had been under pressure following the 3rd EEOC complaint. They needed someone. She was the most qualified person in the building. Terrence pulled out another set of pages. "She's also been quietly interviewing at 2 other firms for the past 4 months. I have that from a source I trust." Ralph leaned back in his chair. Outside the window, Atlanta was waking up, the skyline going gold in the early light. "There's more," Terrence said. "Then give it to me." Glassdoor reviews. Anonymous. So take them for what they are. But the pattern is consistent across 41 separate reviews going back 5 years. He slid a printed summary across. Phrases that repeat. Certain people aren't included in key meetings. Ideas get taken and credited to someone else. Leadership talks about diversity, but the doors stay closed. 41 reviews. Same pattern. Different people. Different years. Ralph picked up the summary and read it slowly. "And one more thing," Terrence said. He reached into the folder and produced a single printed page. "This one I want you to look at carefully." Ralph took it. It was a copy of an internal company email, obtained legally through discovery documents from the Allen lawsuit that had become partially public record before the NDA sealed the rest. The email was from Brent Charlton to Roland Gallmeyer, dated 4 years ago. The subject line was, "CFO Search, Thoughts." The body of the email was 3 sentences. "Roland, board is pushing hard on the diversity angle after the Q3 situation. I think we give them Filbert. She's qualified enough to hold up to scrutiny, and it gets them off our backs. We can manage the rest." Ralph read it twice. He set it face down on the table. The room was very quiet. Terence watched him and said nothing. He understood that Ralph needed a moment, and he was a man who knew how to give people moments. Ralph stood up. He walked to the window and stood with his hands in his pockets, looking down at the street below. A delivery truck was pulling away from the hotel's service entrance. A woman was walking a dog on the sidewalk across the street. Normal morning things. He thought about Nadia Filbert. He had never met her. He knew her name from the deal briefings. She had signed off on the financial disclosures, her signature neat and certain at the bottom of every document. She had been inside this machine for 4 years, brought in to be useful. Managed. He turned back to Terence. "I want to meet her," he said. "Nadia Filbert. Not formally. Not in the building. Somewhere quiet." He paused. "Can Josephine arrange it without it getting back to Roland?" Terence was already making a note. "How soon?" "Tomorrow morning," Ralph said. "Early." Terence closed the folder. "I'll tell Josephine." He stood, gathered the documents, and put the rubber band back around the folder. He held it out to Ralph. Ralph took it, held it at his side. "Terence," he said. "Yeah, this wasn't a bad apple," Ralph said. This was the whole tree. Terence looked at him for a moment. Then he picked up his coat from the back of the chair. "I know," he said. "That's why I came in person." The diner was called Rosie's. It sat on a quiet corner in Decatur, 12 minutes from the hotel, with a hand-painted sign above the door and a bell that jangled when you walked in. Laminate menus, pie under glass on the counter. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee so thick you could almost chew it. The kind of place where nobody wore a conference lanyard and nobody cared who you were. Ralph arrived first. He took a corner booth near the back, facing the door, and ordered coffee and wheat toast he didn't plan to eat. He was 10 minutes early. He was always 10 minutes early. At 7 on the dot, the bell above the door jangled. Nadia Filbert walked in. She was 44, tall and precise in her movements, dressed in a simple dark blazer over a white shirt. No jewelry except small gold studs in her ears. She had the bearing of someone who had spent years learning to take up exactly the right amount of space in rooms that weren't always glad to have her. Not too much, not too little. Her eyes found Ralph immediately, and she walked to the booth without hesitation, which told him something about her. She sat down across from him, ordered coffee when the server came, wrapped both hands around the cup when it arrived, and looked at Ralph with an expression that was carefully professional, and underneath it, very tired. "Mr. Dillon," she said. "Ralph," he said. "Please." She nodded once, but didn't offer her own first name yet. She was being careful. He understood that. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet," he said. "Your chief of staff was very discreet," Nadia said. "I appreciated that." Ralph nodded. He didn't reach for his legal pad. He didn't have a folder in front of him. He had come with nothing but himself, deliberately, because he wanted her to understand that this was not a deposition. He folded his hands on the table and looked at her. "I'm going to tell you something," he said. "And then I'm going to stop talking for a while." She held his gaze. "All right." He told her about the parking lot. Not the version that was already circulating in pieces among the summit's attendees. The full version. Vicky's voice. The words. Roland running across the parking lot and announcing his name and his investment figure to a crowd of bystanders. The suite on the 14th floor. The apology that wasn't one. The 7 words that undid it. Nadia listened without moving. Then Ralph told her what Terence had found. The 3 EEOC complaints. Gregory Allen's lawsuit and the settlement. The Glassdoor reviews with their repeating pattern. He told her about the email from Brent Charlton to Roland. She's qualified enough to hold up to scrutiny, and it gets them off our backs. We can manage the rest. He watched her face when he said that last part. Something moved across it. Not surprise. Something older than surprise. The particular expression of a person hearing out loud a thing they have known privately for a very long time. She looked down at her coffee cup. The diner moved around them, a server refilling someone's orange juice, the cook calling out an order number, the bell above the door jangling as someone came in from the morning street. Normal sounds, easy sounds. Nadia was quiet for long enough that Ralph wondered if she was going to speak at all. Then she did. "I found out about the Charlton email 14 months ago," she said. Her voice was steady. "A paralegal who worked on the Allen case. She left the firm that handled the settlement, and she reached out to me. She felt I deserved to know." Nadia looked up from her cup. "I've been sitting with it for 14 months. Ralph said nothing. "The meetings I wasn't invited to." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was reading from a list she had memorized. "I would find out afterward, sometimes days later, that decisions had been made in rooms I wasn't in. Decisions that fell directly under my role. I would ask Roland, and he would say it was an oversight. The first 6 times I believed him." She paused. "After that, I stopped believing him and started keeping records." "What kind of records?" Ralph asked quietly. "Emails where I wasn't included but should have been. Meeting invitations that went to my direct reports, but not to me. 2 instances where I submitted financial analysis to Roland, and the same analysis appeared in a board presentation credited to Brent Charlton." She set her coffee cup down. "I have all of it, organized by date, in a folder on a drive that has nothing to do with Gallmeyer Meridian servers." Ralph looked at her. "Why haven't you done anything with it?" Nadia was quiet for a moment. "Because I kept thinking it would get better," she said. "And then because I was tired. And then because I told myself the risk wasn't worth it." She looked at her hands. "And then because I didn't know what doing something with it actually looked like. And now?" She looked up at him. Her eyes were clear and steady. "You're asking me that after telling me I was hired to manage optics," she said. "After telling me that Brent Charlton wrote an email calling me manageable." She picked up her coffee cup again and held it in both hands. "What do you think the answer is?" Ralph held her gaze for a long moment. "I want to be clear about something," he said. "I'm not here to use you. I'm not here to recruit you into someone else's agenda. Whatever you decide to do, it needs to be because you're ready, not because I showed up at a diner in Decatur and made you feel like you had to." Nadia looked at him. Something shifted in her expression, a softening that had nothing to do with weakness, more like recognition, like someone finally being spoken to in a language they actually understood. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," Ralph said. She was quiet for a moment. She looked out the window at the morning street. A woman pushing a stroller. A man unlocking a dry cleaner's door. Simple, ordinary things. Then she looked back at Ralph. "I've been not ready for 4 years," she said quietly. "I think I'm done being not ready." Ralph nodded slowly. He picked up his coffee cup and held it toward her. Not a toast, just a small, honest gesture between 2 people who understood each other. She touched her cup to his. Outside, Decatur went about its morning. Inside Rosie's diner, something that had been waiting a long time began, quietly, to move. 3 days passed. They were not quiet days. They just looked quiet, from the outside. Ralph attended the remaining summit sessions. He shook hands and exchanged cards, and said the right things to the right people. He had 2 phone calls with Josephine about Foundation logistics. He had 1 call with his office in Chicago about an unrelated deal that needed attention. He slept 6 hours each night, woke at 5, wrote on his legal pad, drank bad in-room coffee, and watched Atlanta go from dark to gold outside his window. He did not call Roland. Roland called him on the 3rd morning. Ralph was packed and ready to check out. his overnight bag zipped on the luggage rack, his legal pad tucked into his folio. He looked at the screen for 2 rings before he answered. "Ralph." Roland's voice was warm and careful, the way it always was when he wanted something. "I hope the rest of the summit was everything it should have been." "It was a good few days," Ralph said. "I'm glad." A brief pause. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since our conversation in the suite. About the investment. About everything." Another pause. Longer. "I'd like to propose something. I've spoken with our board and our legal team. We're prepared to restructure the terms in your favor. Better equity position. Faster return timeline. And we'd like to offer you an additional board seat. Full voting rights." Ralph sat on the edge of the bed. It was a significant offer. More than significant. It was, by any objective financial measure, an extraordinary concession. The kind that didn't get offered unless the person making it was genuinely scared of losing something. "That's a meaningful proposal," Ralph said. "I want this to work," Roland said. "I want us to move forward, and I want to do it right." He paused once more. "Would you be willing to come to our offices? Review the amended terms in person. Bring your team. I'd like to sit across the table from you and do this properly." Ralph looked at his overnight bag. At the window. At the city outside. "Set it up," he said. "I'll be there." Gallmeyer Meridian's offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Midtown Atlanta. The lobby was all polished stone and living walls and the particular brand of quiet that expensive buildings cultivate deliberately. A receptionist in a headset greeted Ralph, Josephine, and Terrence by name before they reached the desk. They were taken to the executive boardroom on the 31st floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A table long enough to seat 20, with 8 chairs arranged at the near end for this meeting. Water, coffee, and a breakfast spread that nobody touched. The city below them looked small and manageable from up here. That was probably the point. Roland came in first, followed by 2 members of his legal team and Brent Charlton, who had the careful energy of a man who understood he was being watched. Everyone shook hands. Everyone said the right things. The room arranged itself into the familiar geometry of a high-stakes business meeting. Then Nadia Filbert walked in. She set her folder at the far end of the table and took her seat, with the same precise economy of movement Ralph had noticed at the diner. She did not look at Ralph differently than she looked at anyone else in the room. She was a professional, and she was very good at it. Ralph respected that. Roland opened the meeting. His legal team walked through the amended term sheet page by page. The improved equity stake, the accelerated return schedule, the additional board seat with full voting rights. It was a thorough presentation. Everything was in order. Every number was clean. Ralph listened. He asked 3 questions. All 3 were good ones that required real answers. Terrence took notes beside him without expression. Josephine sat with her hands folded and her eyes moving steadily around the room. Then Nadia presented the financial projections. She was brilliant at it. No wasted words. Every number supported by 3 layers of data. She fielded 2 questions from Terrence with the precision of someone who had built the model herself and knew every corner of it. Ralph watched her work and thought about a diner in Decatur, and a woman who had been told in a 3-sentence email that she was manageable. The amended term sheet was slid across the table toward Ralph. He picked it up. Read it front to back. Every page. The room waited. He picked up his pen, held it over the signature line. The room held its breath. He set the pen down. "I'd like 24 hours, he said. Roland's smile didn't flicker. "Of course," he said. "Take the time you need." They shook hands at the elevator. The doors closed. Ralph, Josephine, and Terrence rode down in silence. In the parking garage, Terrence looked at him. "Were you ever actually going to sign it?" Ralph looked straight ahead as the car pulled out into the Atlanta afternoon. No, he said, but I needed to see how they behaved when they thought I would. Josephine, in the back seat, said nothing. She looked out the window. She had already known. Ralph ordered room service at 7. Grilled salmon, rice, a glass of water. He ate at the small desk in his hotel room with his legal pad open beside the plate, working through the notes he'd made during the Gallmeyer Meridian meeting. He was methodical about it, going page by page, circling things, drawing lines between numbers that didn't quite align with what Terrence had found in the company's public filings. He finished eating, pushed the plate to the side, kept working. At 8:43, his phone began to vibrate. Not a call. Notifications. One after another, coming fast enough that the phone moved across the desk on its own. He picked it up and looked at the screen. Twitter. Then Instagram. Then a text from a number he didn't recognize, followed immediately by one from his office manager in Chicago. Then Josephine. He opened Josephine's text first. It said, "Call me right now." He called. She picked up before it rang. "There's a video," she said. "It's been up for about an hour. It's moving fast." "What video?" "The parking lot." Ralph was quiet for 1 second. "How bad?" 37 seconds. Clear audio. "You can see everything." A pause. "It's not from the woman with the silver hair. Someone else. A bystander we didn't know about. Whoever it is has a small account, but the video is sharp, and it's already been picked up by 3 larger accounts." He could hear Josephine typing while she talked. 400,000 views as of 5 minutes ago. Ralph set the phone on the desk and pulled up the video on his own screen. 37 seconds. Vicky's voice, clear as a bell. Her finger. The parking attendant's frozen face. The crowd standing still. And the words, "People like you always think the rules don't apply," sitting in the middle of the clip like something dropped from a height. He watched it once. Then he set the phone face down on the desk. He sat very still for a moment. Then he picked up the phone again and watched the view counter update in real time. By 9:15, it had crossed 800,000. By 10, it was past 1 million. By the time he turned off his bedside lamp and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, it was sitting at 2.1 million and climbing. He didn't sleep. By 3 in the morning, the internet had done what the internet does. Vicky Gallmeyer had been identified. Then Roland. Then Gallmeyer Meridian Brands. Its logo, its stock ticker, its Wikipedia page all circulating alongside the clip. Financial accounts on Twitter began speculating about the pending investment deal. Someone had done enough digging to surface the name Dylan Capital. The phrase $300 million was appearing in comment sections alongside the video like an accelerant on a fire. His inbox had 416 unread emails by dawn. At 6:15, a financial news outlet ran a headline. Ralph read it on his phone in bed. Dylan Capital signals. Deal intact despite viral parking lot confrontation. Sources. He read it twice. He got up, showered, dressed, made the in-room coffee and drank it, standing at the window, while Atlanta went pink and gold below him. The headline had not come from him. It had not come from Josephine or Terrence. It had come from anonymous sources, which meant it had come from someone inside Gallmeyer Meridian who had been authorized to plant it. His silence had been read as compliance. His grace had been packaged and sold as a signal that the deal was proceeding. His phone rang at 7:20. Roland. He answered. Ralph. Roland's voice was apologetic and urgent, layered over something that was trying very hard to sound in control. I want you to know that headline was not authorized by me. Brent acted without my knowledge, and I am handling it internally as we speak. I want to correct the narrative together, a joint statement, whatever you need. Mr. Gallmeyer, Ralph said. Roland stopped. You planted a story using my silence, Ralph said. You took the fact that I hadn't said anything yet and turned it into a public statement on my behalf. His voice was the same quiet it always was. That was what made it land. That's not a miscommunication. That's a decision. Ralph, I understand you're upset. Ralph hung up. He set the phone on the windowsill and looked out at the city. He thought about Amy, about what she used to say to her students when someone had treated them unfairly and they didn't know what to do about it. She would pull up a chair and sit at their level and say, "You don't have to decide right now, but you do have to decide." He picked the phone back up, called Terrence. "We're not pulling the deal," he said, when Terrence answered. A pause. "Ralph, we're not pulling it," Ralph said again. Steady, certain. "We're detonating it." The line was quiet for a moment. "Okay," Terrence said. "Tell me what you need." Terrence arrived at 8. Josephine was already there, sitting at the desk with both laptops open and 3 phones lined up beside them. She had ordered breakfast for all of them: eggs, toast, coffee, fruit. And it sat largely untouched in the middle of the table while they worked. Outside the window, Atlanta was fully awake now, the morning sun hard and bright off the glass towers. Ralph stood at the window with his coffee and looked out at the city for a long moment. Then he turned around. 3 moves, he said, in order. Terrence had his legal pad open. Josephine had both hands on her keyboard. They were ready. "First," Ralph said, "Terrence, I want you to file the EEOC complaint on behalf of Nadia Filbert, today, with everything she has. Her documentation, her records, the Charlton email, all of it. Full formal filing." Terrence was already writing. "She's confirmed she wants to proceed? Call her this morning. She'll confirm." Ralph took a sip of his coffee. "She's been ready for 4 years. She just needed to know someone was standing with her." Terrence nodded and kept writing. "Second," Ralph said. He turned to Josephine. "I need you to find Dolores Evanson. She's staying at this hotel through tomorrow. She's registered for the full summit. Room number, phone, whatever you can get through the conference registry." Josephine was already typing. "Give me 10 minutes. When you have her number, I'm calling her myself." Ralph set his cup down on the windowsill. "She has a longer video than what went viral last night. She told her nephew to wait for the right moment." He paused. "The right moment is now." The room was quiet except for Josephine's keyboard and the distant sound of the city below. "Third," Ralph said, "I'm giving 1 interview. 1. Not to a financial outlet. Not to a news network looking for drama." He looked at Terrence. "You remember Claudia Evers. She writes the inequality beat for the Economic Observer. I've known her for 15 years. She's trustworthy, and she's serious. Get me her direct number." Terrence looked up from his legal pad. "You're going on record." "Completely." A beat. Terrence and Josephine exchanged a brief glance, the kind that passes between people who have worked alongside someone long enough to know when a decision is final. "Okay," Terrence said. Josephine had Dolores's room number in 8 minutes. Ralph called her at 8:20. The phone rang 3 times. "Mr. Dillon," Dolores said when she answered, like she'd been expecting him. Maybe she had. "Ms. Evanson, I'm sorry to call so early." "I was up at 5, she said. "Old habit." Ralph almost smiled. "I wanted to ask you directly. The video you recorded in the parking lot. Your nephew has been holding it. I'd like to ask you to release it now, if you're willing. Not because it helps me, because it's the truth, and it should be seen." A brief silence on the other end. "I watched what went up last night," Dolores said. "That short clip. 37 seconds. Another pause. "Mine is longer." "I know. It has something the other one doesn't," she said. "After you walked inside, she went back to her car, made a phone call." Dolores's voice was steady and precise. She said, "And I have this clearly. Roland, I just handled something. There was a man in our spot. Not a person. A man. Ralph was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. I'll release it today, Dolores said. I'll have my nephew publish it this afternoon with my statement. I've already written the statement. A small pause. I've had it written for 2 days. I was waiting to know the time was right. Thank you, Ralph said. Genuinely. Mr. Dillon. Her voice shifted slightly, still steady, but warmer. I spent 33 years teaching children that what's right and what's easy are usually 2 different things. I'm not about to stop believing that now. He thanked her again and hung up. By noon, Terrence had reached Nadia. She confirmed the EEOC filing without hesitation, her voice clear and certain in a way that told Ralph she had made her peace with this decision long before this phone call. Terrence began the formal filing process from the hotel room table. Documents spread across every available surface. By 2 in the afternoon, Ralph was sitting across from Claudia Evers in a quiet meeting room on the hotel's 2nd floor. She had a recorder on the table between them and a notepad in her lap, and the particular stillness of a journalist who knows when to stop asking questions and let someone talk. Ralph talked. He told her about the parking lot, about Roland's suite, and the 7 words that mattered more than the apology around them, about the foundation and what Amy had believed, about Terrence's findings, about Nadia Filbert, and 4 years of being managed rather than led. He did not perform outrage. He did not raise his voice. He simply told the truth, in order, leaving nothing important out. When he finished, Claudia looked at her recorder for a moment. Then at Ralph. You know what happens when this publishes, she said. Yes, Ralph said. And you're withdrawing the investment. Completely, Ralph said. And I want that in the piece. Not as a threat, as a statement of values, he paused. There's one more thing I want in the piece. The new entity, Meridian Opportunity Partners. We're committing the $300 million there instead, investing in consumer brands with diverse founding and leadership teams. He looked at her steadily. My late wife believed opportunity should not be rationed by the color of someone's skin. I intend to spend the rest of my career making sure it isn't. Claudia wrote that down slowly, word for word. Outside the meeting room window, Atlanta moved through its afternoon, ordinary and bright and completely unaware of what was about to land inside it. Claudia Evers's article went live at 6 the following morning. Ralph read it in bed on his phone before he got up. It was everything he had said, and nothing he hadn't. Claudia had written it straight. No drama added, no editorializing, no breathless language. She hadn't needed any. The facts were enough. They were more than enough. By 7, the article had been shared 40,000 times. By 8, it was the most read piece on the Economic Observer's website in the publication's 11-year history. Ralph showered, dressed, and went downstairs for breakfast. He sat alone at a corner table in the hotel restaurant with his legal pad and his coffee and his phone face down beside his plate. He ate scrambled eggs and wheat toast and watched the morning light move across the restaurant floor. His phone didn't stop vibrating. He didn't turn it over. Josephine found him at 8:30. She sat down across from him, ordered coffee, and opened her own phone. She read from it steadily for 2 minutes while Ralph finished his toast. Then she set it face down on the table beside his and looked at him. 3 institutional investors have formally withdrawn co-investment interest as of this morning, she said. Combined value, $180 million. All 3 sent notice to Gallmeyer Meridian's Investor Relations office within the past hour. She paused. Brent Charlton's office. Ralph picked up his coffee cup. Gallmeyer Meridian's stock opened this morning at $41.12, Josephine continued. It is currently trading at $35.40. That is a 14% drop in the first 90 minutes of trading. She looked at her watch. The market has been open for 93 minutes. Ralph nodded slowly. Two retail partners, both major national chains that carry Gallmeyer Meridian products, have issued statements this morning saying they are reviewing their relationship with the brand in light of recent events. Josephine folded her hands on the table. Neither statement used the word termination. Both statements meant it. Ralph set down his cup. He looked out the restaurant window at the Atlanta street outside. A normal Thursday morning. People walking to work. A food truck setting up on the corner. And Dolores's video? He asked. Published last night at 9. Her nephew ran it with her full statement. Josephine reached into her bag and slid a printed copy of the statement across the table. It's been viewed 6.3 million times as of 20 minutes ago. Ralph picked up the statement and read it. Dolores had written it the way she had apparently done everything. Clearly, directly, without any performance. She wrote about 33 years in a classroom, about what she had witnessed in the parking lot, about the man who had stood still and quiet and dignified while someone pointed a finger at his chest, about why she had recorded it, about why she had waited. I am 77 years old, the statement ended, and I have not changed my mind about what decency looks like. I hope someone finds this useful. Ralph folded the statement and put it in his folio. By noon, the Gallmeyer Meridian Board had convened an emergency session. Ralph knew this because Nadia Filbert sent him a single text at 12:17. It said, "They're meeting right now. All of them. Roland, too." He texted back, "How are you?" A pause. Then, "Better than I've been in 4 years." He set the phone down. By 2 in the afternoon, the news broke that Brent Charlton had been terminated from Gallmeyer Meridian, effective immediately. The company's statement described it as a personnel decision made in the interest of organizational integrity. It mentioned no specifics. It fooled no one. The financial press ran the story within 20 minutes, and every version of it connected Charlton directly to the planted headline, the anonymous sources, and the PR firm he had hired to manage the counter-narrative. Roland released his own statement at 4 o'clock. It was long. It was very carefully worded. It acknowledged the parking lot incident. It acknowledged that Vicky's behavior had been unacceptable. It spoke about Gallmeyer Meridian's commitment to diversity and inclusion in language so polished and empty it could have been written by a machine. It said nothing real. It changed nothing. Comments were disabled. Ralph read it once in the back of the car while Josephine drove them to dinner. Then he handed his phone to Terence without a word. Terence read it, handed it back, and looked out the window. 2 weeks moved in the way that weeks do when consequences are working their way through a system. Not all at once, but steadily, one domino finding the next. Nadia Filbert resigned on a Thursday morning, her statement landing on LinkedIn with the quiet precision of everything she did. Ralph read it at his desk in his Chicago office, 600 miles away, and thought about a corner booth in a Decatur diner and a woman who had said, "I've been not ready for 4 years." She was ready now. The EEOC complaint, once it became public record, pulled 2 more voices into the open. Former Gallmeyer Meridian employees who had signed NDAs consulted their lawyers about what those agreements did and did not cover when a formal government investigation was underway. 2 of them filed supplementary accounts. The pattern that Terence had assembled from public documents was now being assembled again, more loudly, by the people who had lived it. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon 16 days after the parking lot, the Gallmeyer Meridian Board made its decision. Roland Gallmeyer was asked to step down as CEO. The announcement came on a Friday at 4:55 in the afternoon, the traditional graveyard slot for news that companies hope will be buried by the weekend. It wasn't buried. Nothing was buried anymore. The financial press ran it within minutes. Analysts who covered the consumer brands sector wrote about governance failures and institutional trust, and the particular kind of organizational rot that starts at the top and works its way down. Rowland accepted the title of Chairman Emeritus, a suite of empty honors, a compensation package, a graceful exit that was not graceful at all once you looked at what had caused it. Vicky Gallmeyer made no public statement. Her social media had gone dark the morning after the video. The charity boards she sat on, the cultural institutions she had supported, the social committees she had chaired, the invitations stopped arriving. Quietly, without announcement. The way these things always happen in the world, she had built her life inside. She was not destroyed. But the world she had moved through so easily, so certain of her place in it, had shifted underneath her feet, and she was the only one who couldn't see that she had shifted it herself. Ralph received a text from Josephine at 4:58 on that Friday afternoon, 2 minutes after the Rowland announcement went public. It said, "It's done." He read it once, set his phone face down on his Chicago desk, looked out his office window at Lake Michigan going silver in the late afternoon light. He sat like that for a while, not celebrating, not relieved exactly. Something quieter than both of those things. The feeling of watching something that needed to fall finally fall, and knowing that you did not push it, you simply stopped holding it up. He picked up his phone and called Josephine back. "How's Nadia settling in?" he asked. "She started this morning," Josephine said. "She reorganized the entire financial reporting structure before lunch." Ralph almost smiled. "Good," he said. "There's one more thing on your schedule," Josephine said. "Birmingham, next month. The school confirmed." He looked out at the lake. "I know," he said. "I haven't forgotten." The drive from the airport took 22 minutes. Ralph sat in the back seat with his folio on his lap and watched Birmingham move past the window. It was a bright October morning, the kind the city got sometimes in the fall. Sharp blue sky, leaves going amber and red on the trees lining the residential streets, the air carrying that particular cool edge that meant summer had finally let go. He had grown up 12 minutes from here. He knew these streets the way you know things that live in your body rather than your memory. The gas station on the corner that had been a different gas station when he was a boy. The church with the white steeple that his mother had taken him to every Sunday without exception. The barber shop where his father used to take him for haircuts and where the men talked about everything and nothing for hours while the radio played. He hadn't been back in 8 months. He should come more often. He knew that. He told himself that every time. Westfield Elementary sat at the end of a wide residential street lined with oak trees. It was a single-story brick building, well-maintained, with a painted mural running the length of the exterior wall facing the parking lot. Bright colors, children's faces, a sun in one corner and a bookshelf in the other. Amy had helped paint that mural. She had come home with yellow paint in her hair and laughed about it for a week. Ralph looked at it through the car window as they pulled in. He sat there for a moment after the car stopped. Then he picked up his folio, got out, and walked toward the entrance. The gymnasium was in the back of the building, past a corridor lined with student artwork and hand-lettered motivational signs, and a trophy case holding 30 years of spelling bee plaques and science fair ribbons and one regional basketball championship from 2019. Ralph walked slowly down that corridor. He read the student artwork. He stopped in front of a drawing taped to the wall at eye level, a crayon house with a yellow sun, a family of 4 standing in front of it, everyone the same size, everyone smiling. He stood there for a moment longer than he needed to. Then he pushed through the gymnasium doors. The room hit him like something physical. Not the noise. Though there was noise, the particular beautiful noise of 300 elementary school children who have been asked to sit still and are doing their best. It was the feeling of it, the aliveness, the smell of floor polish and sneakers, and the particular energy of children who are still young enough to believe that showing up somewhere matters. They were arranged on the gymnasium floor in rows, cross-legged, fidgeting, whispering to each other, some of them craning their necks to see who had just come through the doors. Teachers stood at intervals along the walls. The principal, a broad-shouldered woman named Dr. Eugene Arnold, who had taught alongside Amy for 6 years, stood near the podium at the front with an expression on her face that was trying very hard not to be emotional and not quite succeeding. Josephine was in the back row, arms folded, watching Ralph come in. Terence sat beside her, his legal pad on his knee out of pure habit, not writing anything. Nadia Filbert sat in the front row, first seat on the left, at Ralph's specific invitation. She had flown in from Atlanta that morning. Ralph walked to the podium. Dr. Arnold introduced him. She talked about the foundation. She talked about what the endowment would mean for Westfield and for the 12 other Birmingham schools that would benefit in the program's first year. She talked about Amy, her voice catching once, just once on the name, and what kind of teacher she had been, and what kind of person. The children listened with the focused attention that children give to things they sense are important, even when they don't fully understand why. Then it was Ralph's turn. He stood at the podium and looked out at the room, at the children, at the teachers, at Dr. Arnold standing to the side with her hand pressed flat against her chest, at Nadia in the front row with her hands folded in her lap, at Josephine in the back with her arms still folded and her eyes very bright. He had 4 speeches in his folio. He did not open it. He thought about a parking lot, a hot August morning, a woman's finger, and 7 words, and a crowd that went silent. He thought about a suite on the 14th floor, and coffee that went cold. He thought about a diner in Decatur, and a woman who had been not ready for 4 years. He thought about Dolores Evanson standing 20 feet away with her phone raised and her school teacher's eyes seeing everything. He thought about how small that parking lot moment had been. He thought about how large everything it became. He looked at the children. "My wife used to start every school year the same way," he said. His voice carried easily in the big room. "First day of school, every year, she would stand right where I'm standing now. Well, not here exactly, but in front of her class. And she would say the same thing." He paused. She would say, "Every single person in this room matters. Not because of what they own. Not because of what their parents own. Not because of the car in the parking lot, or the address on the mailbox, or the price of the shoes on their feet." He looked out at the rows of children. "Every single person in this room matters because they are a person. And that is enough. That has always been enough." The gymnasium was very quiet. A boy in the second row had stopped fidgeting. A girl near the wall was watching Ralph with her chin resting on her hand. "She was right," Ralph said. "She was always right. And I'm going to spend every dollar I have making sure the world she believed in gets built." The applause started in the front row. Dr. Arnold began it, a single pair of hands, and then the teachers along the walls joined in, and then it spread to the children, some of them clapping with the full-body enthusiasm that children bring to things, and the sound of it rose and filled the gymnasium completely, bouncing off the floor and the walls and the ceiling until the whole room was full of it. In the back row, Josephine Okafor unfolded her arms. She began to clap. Ralph stood at the podium and let it wash over him. He did not look up at the ceiling. He did not look away. He looked straight out at the room, at the children and the teachers and the people who had come because they had loved Amy or because they believed what she had believed, and he let himself feel the full weight of it. Not the parking lot, not Roland's suite, Not the video or the stock price or the board meeting or any of it. Just this room, these children, this sound. This was what it had all been for. This was what it had always been for. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.